That cold evening, no one expected a rusty metal door to change a life. What started as just another abandoned storage unit became a story the whole town tried to explain, and few had the courage to tell. Behind locked doors and forgotten boxes, there are still human hearts. Elena gripped the steering wheel of her old Ford, the engine ticking like a weary heartbeat as she pulled into the gravel lot of Sunset Storage. The sun hung low, painting the corrugated metal roofs in bruised oranges and purples, casting long shadows across the rows of units. Chain-link fences rattled faintly in the breeze, and beyond them, the distant hum of highway traffic blended with the buzz of fluorescent lights flickering to life overhead. The air smelled of warm asphalt and dust, thick enough to coat her throat. She hadn't eaten since breakfast, but hunger was just another shadow trailing her these days. At 38, Elena Ramirez was a ghost of the woman she'd been 5 years ago, before the accident that took Javier. A single car crash on a rain-slicked road, and suddenly she was alone with their 2 boys, Miguel at 12 and little Tomas at 8. The life insurance had barely covered the funeral. The rest vanished into medical bills and rent hikes. Now, working double shifts at the diner, scrubbing grease off plates while her feet screamed in worn sneakers, she was down to her last desperate gamble. $2,000 scraped from tips and a pawned wedding ring, all riding on this auction. The storage manager, a grizzled man named Hank with a clipboard and a perpetual squint, nodded her toward Unit 47. "Last one of the night," he said, his voice gravelly from years of chain smoking. "Owner stopped paying 6 months back. Name was Harlan something. Old-timer, I think. Never saw much of him." Elena's hands trembled as she signed the bidder's sheet, her signature a shaky scrawl. The auction was quick, brutal, a handful of flippers in faded jeans, barking numbers like predators. She won with a bid just under her limit, her heart pounding as the gavel fell. Hank handed her the key, a cold brass thing that bit into her palm. "You got till morning to clear it out, or it's double storage fees. Lock's yours now." She nodded, words stuck in her throat. The boys were with her sister Rosa tonight, probably scarfing down microwave tacos and asking when Mom would be home. Elena pictured their faces, Miguel's quiet worry, Thomas's wide-eyed trust, and pushed the image away. This had to work, flipping whatever junk lay inside. Furniture, tools, maybe antiques. Enough to pay the overdue electric bill, buy school clothes, maybe even a used laptop for Miguel's homework. She walked the length of the corridor, her sneakers crunching on grit. The units stretched like silent sentinels, doors dented and tagged with faded numbers. Unit 47 was at the end, tucked in shadow, its paint peeling in curls like old skin. A rusted padlock hung open, waiting. Elena hesitated, key in hand. The air here was cooler, laced with the faint tang of mildew and something earthier, like damp wood left too long in the rain. She glanced back at Hank, already shuffling toward the office, his silhouette swallowed by the dying light. With a deep breath, she slid the key in. The lock resisted, then gave with a metallic scrape that echoed down the empty hall. The door rolled up on protesting wheels, groaning like a confession. Inside, the unit was dim, lit only by the spill of sunset through a high vent. Stacks of wooden boxes filled the space, haphazard and leaning, their surfaces splintered and dark with rot. They weren't neat crates like she'd imagined, no labeled shipping containers, no tidy pallets. These were rough-hewn things. Some collapsed inward, others swollen and buckled, as if the wood itself had given up fighting the damp. Elena stepped inside, the concrete floor gritty underfoot. The smell hit her then, rot, deep and organic, like forgotten vegetables in a compost heap, mingled with the sharp bite of mold. She flicked on her phone's flashlight, the beam cutting through the gloom. The boxes were everywhere, dozens, maybe more, piled from floor to ceiling in places, their lids warped or missing. Splinters caught the light, and she saw the decay up close. Black veins of fungus creeping along the edges, sawdust pooling at the bases like spilled secrets. What had Harlan stored here? Tools, books, something worth salvaging. She pried at the nearest box, her nails digging into sodden wood. It crumbled under her fingers, revealing nothing much. Shards of brittle paper, yellowed and illegible, fluttered out like dead leaves. No treasure, no quick flip. Disappointment settled in her chest, heavy as the humid air. But deeper in, toward the back, one box stood apart, smaller, sealed tight with metal bands, its wood pale and intact amid the ruin. It looked almost new, untouched by the decay that claimed the others. Elena's pulse quickened. Maybe that was it, the one thing worth something. The sky outside had deepened to twilight, the lot emptying as other bidders drove off with their hauls. She couldn't stay. The boys would be waiting, and Rosa had a shift starting soon. With effort, she wrestled the door down, the lock clicking shut like a finality. Driving home through the outskirts, past strip malls shuttered for the night and fields blurring into darkness, Elena's mind raced. What if the whole unit was worthless rot? She'd be back to square one, scraping for rent, watching the boys' faces fall when she skipped their birthday cake again. Javier would have hated this, her taking such a risk. "We're builders, not gamblers," he'd say, his calloused hands steady on hers. But Javier was gone, and the bills weren't. That night, in the cramped apartment that smelled of instant noodles and laundry detergent, Elena lay awake on the sagging couch. The boys slept in the next room, their breath soft through the thin wall. She stared at the ceiling cracks, imagining the unit's contents. Rotting boxes, maybe Harlan's failed business, old farm equipment warped by time, or worse, something illegal hidden away. Drugs, stolen goods. Her stomach twisted. No, that was paranoia talking. But the intact box nagged at her, a promise in the decay. What if it held tools she could sell, or documents leading to heirs who owed back fees? Hope flickered, fragile as a match in wind. By morning, exhaustion pulled her under, dreams tangled with splintered wood and echoing locks. She had to go back, face whatever truths or ruins waited inside, for the boys, for a life that didn't feel like constant surrender. The morning light filtered through the thin curtains of Elena's apartment, casting pale stripes across the cluttered kitchen table. She hadn't slept more than a few fitful hours, her mind replaying the creak of that storage door like a loop of bad film. Coffee brewed in the chipped pot, its bitter steam mingling with the faint lingering scent of last night's takeout. Greasy burgers from the diner, wolfed down with the boys before bed. Miguel was already up, hunched over his cereal bowl, sketching in a notebook with a pencil stub. Tomas bounced in his chair, legs kicking the rungs, oblivious to the shadows under his mother's eyes. "You going back there today, Mom?" Miguel asked, not looking up. His voice was steady, but Elena caught the undercurrent. The way he always tried to sound older than 12, like he could shoulder some of the weight. She forced a smile, pouring milk that was a day from expiring. "Yeah, after I drop you at school. Got to see what's worth keeping." Thomas cheered, spilling flakes onto the linoleum, but Miguel's gaze lingered, searching. He knew about the auction, the money she'd sunk in. Elena ruffled his hair, dodging the questions she couldn't answer yet. The electric bill sat unopened on the counter, red-stamped and final, a reminder that this gamble couldn't end in rot. The drive to Sunset Storage felt longer in daylight, the outskirts waking under a hazy sun. Trucks rumbled past on the highway, their exhaust a low growl, while the storage lot baked in the rising heat. Asphalt shimmered, releasing that familiar oily tang, and the chain-link fence hummed with trapped insects. Hank was outside, hosing down the gravel near the office, water spraying in lazy arcs. He nodded as she parked, wiping his hands on a rag. "Back already? Figured you'd want a truck for the haul." Eleanor shook her head. key jingling in her pocket like a guilty secret. Just scouting first. See if it's even worth the effort. He grunted, eyeing her old Ford skeptically, but said nothing more. She walked the corridor alone this time, the fluorescent bulbs overhead buzzing to life with a persistent drone, casting stark pools of light on the peeling walls. Unit 47 waited, its door sealed tight, the air around it cooler, heavier with that earthy rot she'd tried to forget. She unlocked it slowly, the key turning with less resistance now, as if the mechanism remembered her touch. The door rolled up smoothly, daylight flooding the space and revealing the decay in cruel detail. The wooden boxes loomed like forgotten monuments, their surfaces etched with cracks and swells, black mold feathering the edges like frost on a winter window. Dust motes danced in the beam, and the smell rushed out, damp wood, fermented and sour, clinging to her clothes like regret. Elena stepped inside, her sneakers sticking slightly to the concrete where moisture had seeped. She started with the outer piles, the ones that had seemed promising in the twilight. A pry bar from her trunk, borrowed from Javier's old toolbox, made quick work of the first lid. It splintered with a wet crack, revealing layers of sodden newspapers, yellowed and pulped, wrapped around what looked like rusted tools. Hammers with handles warped like twisted roots, saw blades dulled and pitted. No value there, not even for scrap. She pushed deeper, heart sinking as box after box yielded the same, fragments of a life abandoned, shards of glass from broken jars, coils of frayed rope, stacks of ledger books swollen shut, their pages fused into illegible mush. Harlan's name appeared faintly on one cover, scrawled in faded ink, Harlan's Timber Works, dated years back. By midday, sweat beaded on her forehead, the unit's confines turning stifling under the climbing sun. Her arms ached from heaving the debris to one side, creating a narrow path toward the back. That's when she reached the intact box again, the outlier amid the ruin. It sat low on the floor, about the size of a footlocker, its pine boards pale and unmarred, bound with thin iron straps that gleamed dully. No rot touched it, even the surrounding dust seemed to respect its boundaries. Elena knelt, tracing the edges with tentative fingers. The wood was smooth, almost warm to the touch as if it held some inner life. A small brass latch secured it, unmarked by rust. She hesitated, the pry bar hovering. What if this was the key? The one salvageable piece, tools inside, maybe heirlooms or papers proving ownership of something bigger. Or nothing, just more disappointment to haul away. Memories flooded her. Javier in their garage, sorting scrap from his construction jobs. His laugh when she'd tease him about being a hoarder. Everything's got a story, Eleanor. You just got to listen. But these boxes weren't stories. They were failures, Harlan's and now threatening to be hers. The boys' faces flashed. Miguel's report card waiting for supplies she couldn't afford. Thomas's gap-toothed grin fading if the lights went out for good. A shadow fell across the doorway. Elena startled, gripping the bar like a weapon. It was a woman, mid-40s, with grease-streaked overalls and a toolbox in hand. The maintenance worker, she'd seen her around yesterday, fixing a leaky faucet. "Name's Carla," the woman said, wiping her brow with a bandana. Her voice was steady, laced with a faint southern drawl. "Hank said you bought 47. Saw you wrestling that mess. Need a hand?" Elena straightened, wary but grateful for the interruption. "It's mostly junk. Rotting boxes feels like a lost cause." Carla stepped inside, surveying the piles with a practiced eye. She kicked at a collapsed crate, revealing more sodden paper. "Harlan stuff, huh? Old guy who owned the lumber yard up on Route 9. Closed up shop years ago after his wife passed. Heard he hoarded everything. Failed orders, prototypes, you name it. Kept paying for this unit till he couldn't." The words hung in the humid air, stirring something in Elena. A connection to the decay. Another life unraveled by loss. Carla nodded at the intact box. "That one's different. sealed like it's hiding something important. You gonna open it? Elena's throat tightened. The unit felt smaller now, the buzzing lights pressing in, the distant traffic, a mocking reminder of normalcy outside. She thought of calling it quits, locking the door and cutting her losses. 2 grand down, but no deeper hole, or prying it open, risking whatever truth lay inside. Carla waited, patient, her presence a quiet anchor. "Take your time," she said softly. "But secrets like that, they don't stay buried forever." Elena set the bar against the latch, the metal cool and unyielding. With a breath that echoed in the silence, she pressed down. The latch gave with a soft click, the lid lifting on hidden hinges. Inside, nestled in faded velvet lining, was a single wooden carving, an intricate model of a house no bigger than her hand, its details sharp. Tiny windows, a sloped roof, even carved smoke curling from a chimney. But it wasn't just any house. Etched on the base was a date, and below it, in careful script, "For Elena, our forever home, Harlan, 1985. Her name, not hers, but the echo chilled her. Carla leaned in, eyes widening. "That's no junk. Looks personal. Harlan's wife was Elena too, I think. Died young, left him broken." The carving felt heavy in Elena's palm, its weight pulling at threads of the past, loss mirrored in wood. But beneath it, tucked in the lining, was a folded envelope, yellowed but intact. She didn't open it yet. The air thickened with questions, the rot around them suddenly feeling like a veil over something unfinished, human. As the afternoon waned, shadows lengthening across the concrete, Eleanor locked the unit once more. The carving and envelope clutched in her bag. Driving home, the sun dipping low and painting the sky in somber hues, her mind whirled. Was this a sign, a bridge from Harlan's grief to her own? Or the start of complications, family claims, legal tangles? The boys would be home soon, demanding stories of her day. For the first time in months, hope stirred, tentative and real, amid the fear of what else those boxes might whisper. Elena sat at the kitchen table that evening, the apartment's single bulb casting a warm but weary glow over the scarred wood surface. The boys had crashed early, exhausted from soccer practice and the endless energy of 8 and 12-year-olds. Their snores a soft rhythm through the paper-thin walls. She unfolded the envelope carefully, the paper crackling like dry leaves underfoot. The handwriting inside was precise, faded but legible, a letter from Harlan to his Elena, dated 1985, the year before their wedding anniversary. Words of love spilled across the page, promises of the home he'd build, dreams of children running through halls he'd carve himself. "This model is our blueprint," it read. "Every splinter tells our story." Tucked beside it was a small key, brass like the one to the unit, and a yellow deed fragment for a plot of land up on Route 9 near Harlan's old lumberyard. Her fingers traced the ink, a chill settling despite the humid night air seeping through the cracked window. It wasn't treasure, not in the way she'd hoped, no stacks of cash or gold-veined relics. But it felt like a fragment of someone else's heart, left to moulder with the rot. Harlan's Elena, gone too soon from illness, leaving him to hoard these boxes as memorials to what he'd lost. Elena Ramirez felt the echo keenly, her own grief a shadow twin. Javier's accident had stolen their plans too, a house they'd sketched on napkins, dreams deferred by his long hours at the mill. Now, this discovery twisted inside her. Was the unit a windfall or a burden? Claiming it might mean unraveling Harlan's legacy, notifying kin who could contest her bid, or worse, if there were more secrets buried in those decaying crates. Sleep evaded her again, the letter's words looping in her mind like a half-remembered melody. By dawn, resolve hardened. She couldn't walk away, not with the boy's future dangling like a frayed rope. After dropping them at school, promises of tacos for dinner masking her unease, she headed back to Sunset Storage. The morning haze clung to the outskirts, muting the industrial sprawl in greys and soft blues. The lot was quiet, save for the distant whine of a semi on the highway and the faint drip of dew from the eaves. Asphalt still held the night's coolness, a brief mercy before the sun baked it into shimmering waves. Elena parked, the Ford's door creaking in protest, and grabbed her pry bar and a pair of gloves from the trunk, Javier's old work ones, stiff with disuse. Hank was in the office, nursing coffee from a stained mug. "You still at it?" he called as she passed, his squint sharpening. "That unit's a black hole." Harlan was eccentric. Folks said he stored experiments after the yard folded. Timber failures, weird prototypes. Nothing illegal far as I know, but odd enough to keep people whispering. Elena's steps faltered at the door to the corridor, his words stirring the unease she'd buried. Experiments? The rotting boxes took on new menace. Chemicals leaching into the wood, unstable loads from a desperate man's final grasp at invention. She unlocked Unit 47, the door groaning upward to release that familiar miasma. Rot deepened by overnight damp, like earth turned after a storm, undercut by a sharper note, almost chemical, biting at her nostrils. Fluorescent light from the hall spilled in, illuminating the cleared path she'd hacked yesterday. Debris piled like casualties to one side. Carla was already there, waiting with a flashlight and a canvas tote of tools slung over her shoulder. "Couldn't stay away, huh?" she said, her drawl warm, but edged with caution. She changed from overalls to a faded flannel, sleeves rolled to show forearms scarred from years of wrenching pipes and patching roofs. At 42, Carla had her own scars, invisible ones from a divorce that left her renting a trailer on the yard's edge, fixing what others broke for a living. That letter shook you, Harlan's story. It's like looking in a mirror sometimes. Lost my brother young, hoarding starts as holding on. Elena nodded, gloved hands flexing. It mentions prototypes. Hank said the same. What if there's something dangerous in here? I can't risk the boys, or myself, getting tangled in whatever Harlan left. The air felt thicker, the boxes looming with silent accusation, their splintered forms casting jagged shadows. She thought of Thomas's small hands, sticky from playground dirt, and Miguel's quiet pleas for stability. One wrong find, and the unit could drag them into police reports, liens or worse. Claims from Harlan's estranged son, rumored to live out west, bitter over the family business. They worked methodically, Carla's steady presence a balm against the rising dread. The next box yielded warped planks etched with measurements, sketches of furniture designs faded to ghosts, Harlan's unbuilt dreams. But as they delved deeper, suspicion coiled tighter. A sealed crate, smaller than the others, resisted the pry bar until Carla wedged it open with a crowbar borrowed from her kit. Inside, amid sawdust clumped like wet clay, lay glass vials. Dozens, stoppered and murky, labeled in Harlan's script, "Resin test, do not open." The liquid inside swirled lazily, a faint iridescent sheen catching the light. No explosion, no fumes, but the implication hung heavy. Experimental sealants, perhaps toxic from his failed attempts to revive the lumberyard. "Heard stories," Carla murmured, stepping back. "Harlan tinkered after his wife died, trying to build something lasting, but it ate him up, sold off equipment, stored the rejects here. Could be harmless now, but if it's hazardous waste, authorities get involved. You're looking at fines, cleanup you can't afford." Elena's pulse thrummed in her ears, the unit's confines pressing like a vice. She imagined flashing lights, officials in hazmat suits, her name in reports as the fool who bid on poison, or Harlan's son appearing, demanding it all back, painting her as a scavenger. The moral fork sharpened. Call the environmental agency now, risk losing everything and alerting the family, seal it shut, pretend ignorance, and salvage what she could quietly. Javier's voice echoed, steady as oak. Truth's the only foundation that holds. But truth here felt like quicksand. Carla knelt by another box, her flashlight beam probing a collapsed corner. "Wait, look at this." She pulled out a ledger, its cover buckled, but pages salvageable. Entries chronicled Harlan's decline, debts mounting after Elena's death, prototypes that cracked under test, a final note scrawled in haste. "For my boy, if he ever comes back. The land's his inheritance. Key unlocks the rest." The key from the envelope fit the description, pointing to a hidden compartment, perhaps. Not crime, but tragedy, a father's desperate archive rotting away. As noon approached, the sun slanting harsh rays through the vent, Elena wiped sweat from her brow, the gloves gritty with residue. Fear gnawed, but so did a spark of clarity. These weren't just boxes, they were Harlan's unfinished amends, mirroring her own fight to build anew. Carla met her eyes, nodding. "We document it all, photos, notes, then decide. Rushing gets you buried deeper." They stepped out into the blinding light, the door rattling shut behind them. The air outside tasted clean, laced with pine from distant woods, a reminder of life beyond the rust and decay. Driving home, the letter and ledger on the passenger seat, Elena's grip tightened on the wheel. The stakes had risen, not to riches, but to a crossroads of conscience. For the first time, the unit felt less like a gamble and more like a call to courage, one prying lid at a time. Comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far these stories of courage in forgotten places can travel. The afternoon sun beat down on the storage lot like a relentless interrogator, turning the asphalt into a skillet that radiated heat through the soles of Elena's sneakers. She and Carla had returned after a quick lunch of vending machine sandwiches, stale bread and processed cheese that sat heavy in her stomach, mirroring the weight of the ledger now tucked into her bag. The corridor's fluorescent lights hummed louder in the midday glare, their buzz syncing with the pulse in Elena's temples. Dust swirled in eddies at their feet as they approached Unit 47, the door's metal surface hot to the touch, as if the secrets inside had been simmering. Elena unlocked it with hands that still trembled slightly, the key slot slick with sweat. The door rolled up, exhaling that cloying rot, now laced with the faint, acrid tang of whatever chemicals those vials held, a reminder that Harlan's experiments weren't entirely dormant. Carla flicked on her flashlight despite the daylight spill, its beam slicing through the gloom like a scalpel. The cleared path from yesterday snaked deeper, flanked by the piled debris, splintered wood, sodden ledgers, and those eerie vials, now carefully bagged and set aside in Carla's tote. "We take it slow," Carla said, her voice a steady anchor in the stifling air. "No rushing the ghosts." They worked in tandem, gloves whispering against warped surfaces, the scrape of the pry bar punctuating the silence like hesitant breaths. Elena's mind raced ahead, tangled in hypotheticals. If those vials were toxic, one careless move could summon inspectors, turning her bid into a liability that swallowed her savings whole. The boys' faces haunted her, Miguel's furrowed brow during their morning rush, Tomas clutching her leg as she left, whispering, "Find something good, Mom." Good. What did that even mean here amid Harlan's unraveling life? The letter's words echoed, promises unkept, a home never built. Her own unbuilt dreams pressed close. Javier's sketches for their house, yellowing in a drawer, dreams deferred by grief and grind. The next box resisted, its lid swollen shut like a sealed confession. Carla wedged the crowbar in, muscles straining under her flannel, and it gave with a splintering pop that echoed off the concrete walls. Inside, no vials or tools, just stacks of photographs, edges curled and spotted with mold, but the images sharp enough to pierce. Harlan younger, his face unlined and hopeful, arm around a woman who shared Eleanor's dark hair and warm smile. His Eleanor, laughing at a lumberyard picnic, saw in hand. More photos. Blueprints pinned to a workshop wall, a half-carved mantelpiece, notes scribbled in margins about durable finishes for forever homes. But deeper in the pile, the tone shifted. Harlan alone, gaunt and shadowed, photos of empty rooms in what looked like the old yard office, dated after her death. One showed a boy, maybe 10, turning away from the camera, Harlan's hand hovering but not touching. His son, Carla murmured, holding up the image. Mark, I think. Left after the funeral. Cut ties when Harlan wouldn't sell the land. Rumors said the boy blamed him for not moving on. Elena's chest tightened, the air in the unit growing thicker, oppressive. These weren't just relics. They were fragments of fracture. A father's hoarding born of isolation, boxing up failures to shield a legacy from further loss. She thought of her own silences with the boys, the way grief had walled her off since Javier's crash, turning their apartment into a shrine of half-lived days. The moral pull sharpened. Expose this archive, contact Mark, and risk him reclaiming everything, leaving her with nothing but echoes. Or bury it deeper, salvage the wood for resale, and build her own fragile future on someone else's pain. Javier's voice cut through, soft but firm. We don't steal stories, mi amor. We honor them. Carla set the photos aside, her scarred hands gentle. This changes things. If the land deed's real, that key from the letter, it might unlock more than memories. Harlan's yard sat on acres up on Route 9, prime for development now, with the highway expansion. But if Mark's the heir, he could have rights. Calling him means giving up the unit, maybe. Or the cops. If those prototypes cross lines into waste dumping. The word cops landed like a stone in still water, rippling dread. Elena imagined blue lights flashing across the lot, questions about her bid, her desperation laid bare in a sterile office. The boys questioned by social workers if it escalated, child services, sniffing around her double shifts, the unstable home. No, she couldn't let that touch them. But silence felt like complicity, hoarding Harlan's tragedy as her own. They pressed on, the heat building, sweat tracing paths down Elena's back, soaking her shirt. Another box, this one sealed with rusted nails, yielded a metal lockbox, small, dented, the kind Javier used for tools. The key from the envelope fit perfectly, turning with a click that seemed to resonate in her bones. Inside, no fortune, just documents, the full deed to the Route 9 plot, notarized but never transferred, marked for Mark, when you're ready. Attached was a will fragment, Harlan's shaky signature affirming the storage as my life's work to pass or protect as conscience dictates. And a letter, unfinished, addressed to his son. I kept it all because losing you after her. It broke the rest. The prototypes were my fight to build something unbreakable. Forgive the mess. The land's yours, if you want it. No mention of crime, just a man's unraveling. Debts from failed innovations, isolation after double loss, the boxes a desperate bid to preserve what family remained. Tears pricked Elena's eyes, unbidden. The unit's dim light blurring the papers. This wasn't danger, it was duty deferred, Harlan's final reach across years. Carla placed a hand on her shoulder, the touch grounding, like a neighbor sharing porch wisdom after dark. He left it unfinished. Like us sometimes, you decide what to finish. The words hung, heavy with shared scars, Carla's brother gone to addiction. Her own marriage splintered like these crates. As the sun dipped, casting long shadows through the vent, they sealed the lockbox and stepped out, the door clanging shut like a paused heartbeat. The lot had cooled slightly, the chain-link fence whispering in the breeze, distant traffic a soothing drone. Elena drove home with the documents beside her, the carving in her lap, its carved smoke a faint promise. Fear still coiled, but clarity edged in. Contacting Mark wasn't surrender. It was the honest path, bridging losses. For Harlan, for her boys, for the woman she'd become. That night, as Thomas curled against her on the couch, Miguel sketching nearby, Elena whispered a quiet vow. The boxes weren't ruin. They were a call to mend what rot had claimed. The evening settled over Elena's apartment like a heavy blanket, the kind that muffled sounds but not worries. She sat cross-legged on the living room floor, the documents spread before her under the lamp's jaundiced glow, casting elongated shadows that danced with every page turn. The air smelled of canned soup simmering on the stove, tomato and basil, a small comfort against the chill seeping through the window frame. Miguel hovered nearby, pretending to read his history book, but his eyes flicked to the papers, curiosity warring with the caution she'd taught him. Tomas was in bed, his stuffed bear clutched tight, the day's energy spent on backyard tag with the neighbor kids. Elena's fingers, still rough from the gloves, traced the deed's edges, the paper crisp where the rot hadn't reached. Route 9 land, 5 acres, once Harlan's pride, now potentially a lifeline or a lawsuit waiting to uncoil. She'd told the boys a sanitized version over dinner. Found some old plans from the unit might help us out. Miguel had nodded, too perceptive to press, while Tomas beamed, imagining treasure maps. But alone now. The truth pressed in. The will fragment wasn't ironclad. No notary, just Harlan's intent scrawled in desperation. Contacting Mark meant opening a door to claims, perhaps demanding the unit's contents as family heirlooms, her $2,000 evaporating like morning fog. Or worse, if those prototypes proved hazardous, environmental reports could flag the site, pinning cleanup costs on her as the current owner. Javier's photo watched from the mantel, his smile steady, but she felt the weight of his absence more acutely. The man who'd always navigated red tape with quiet resolve, leaving her to chart this alone. Sleep came in fragments, haunted by dreams of splintering wood and echoing accusations. By morning, the sky outside was overcast, a slate-grey veil that mirrored her mood as she loaded the boys into the Ford. School drop-off was a blur of kisses and backpacks, Thomas's "Love you, Mom" lingering like a talisman. The drive to Sunset Storage wound through the outskirts, past fields dotted with rusting silos and the skeletal frames of abandoned billboards, the highway's hum a constant undercurrent. The lot greeted her with its familiar bite, asphalt warming under the weak sun, releasing oily vapors that mixed with the faint, briny scent of distant rain. Chain link rattled in the gusts, and Hank's truck sat parked crookedly by the office, steam rising from his coffee mug, visible through the window. Carla was waiting at the corridor's mouth, her toolbox at her feet, flannel tied around her waist against the rising humidity. Her face held the lines of someone who'd stared down worse than rotting crates, eyes steady, mouth set in that no-nonsense line that had become Elena's reluctant anchor. "Slept on it?" Carla asked, falling into step as they walked. The fluorescents buzzed overhead, their light harsh on the peeling paint, flaking like old scabs. "Barely," Elena admitted, key biting into her palm. "The deed, it's real but messy. If Mark shows up, he could take it all. And those vials, what if they're not just failed experiments? Harlan's notes mention proprietary mixes. Could be patented or worse, something he borrowed without permission." The words tasted like fear, sharp and metallic. She'd spent the night Googling on her phone. Battery dying mid-search, old lumber scandals, toxic sealants from the 80s that poisoned workers, lawsuits that bankrupted families. Her imagination spun darker, Harlan cutting corners, storing evidence of wrongdoing here, the unit a time capsule of liability. The door to 47 rolled up with a groan, the interior exhaling its now familiar rot, deepened by the night's moisture into something almost alive, pulsing with unseen spores. Dust motes swirled in the beam from Carla's flashlight, and the piled debris loomed like a barricade, the bagged vials glinting accusingly from the corner. Eleanor's sneakers crunched on stray splinters as they delved deeper, the path narrowing to a crawl space amid the leaning stacks. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the cool concrete, the air thick and cloying, pressing against her lungs like unspoken regrets. They tackled a mid-level box next, its sides bowed outward, nails protruding like wary teeth. The pry bar slipped twice in Elena's grip, nerves fraying, before Carla steadied it with a firm hand. The lid gave way, wood crumbling to reveal not tools or photos, but bundled correspondence, letters tied with twine, postmarked from a law firm in the city, dated post Harlan's wife's death. Elena untied them with trembling fingers, the paper brittle under touch. Demands for payment on outstanding loans, warnings about the yard's closure, and then a notice from the County Environmental Board. Violation, improper storage of experimental materials, cease operations or face seizure. Harlan's replies were frantic, pleading extensions, promises to dispose properly. No admission of guilt, but the implications scorched. He'd hidden the prototypes here to evade inspection, the rotting boxes a shield against discovery. Carla whistled low, kneeling beside her. This is bigger than family drama. If that board never followed up, your ownership could trigger a revisit, fines, quarantines, the works. And Mark, if he knew about this, he might have walked away to avoid the mess. Her voice held no judgment, just the raw edge of shared burden, her own past flickering in her eyes, debts from her brother's funeral that still nipped at her heels. Elena's heart hammered, the unit's walls closing in. The buzz of light sinking with her rising panic. She pictured the fallout, officials swarming the lot, yellow tape across the door, her name linked to Harlan's sins. The boys uprooted, maybe, if creditors circled. Temptation surged. Shovel it all into a dumpster under cover of night, claim ignorance, salvage the deed quietly through some back-channel sale. Easy, wrong. Javier's creed echoed louder, integrity over escape, but courage felt distant, eroded by the very rot surrounding them. A deeper crate caught Carla's beam then, tucked low and sealed with heavy clasps, its wood darker, almost charred at the edges. "This one's different," she said, voice dropping. They wrestled it free, muscles straining, the metal warm as if fevered. The clasps yielded to the crowbar, revealing insulation. Yellowed foam, cracked and peeling, wrapped around what looked like core samples, wood planks infused with that iridescent resin, test pieces from Harlan's obsession. But nestled among them was a final envelope, thicker, stamped, "Personal Do Not Destroy." Inside, a confession of sorts, Harlan's handwriting looping wildly. The mixes were my own, derived from old recipes, no theft, but the warnings. I ignored them for the dream. If this reaches you, Mark, know I built for us, not against the world. The land holds the proof. Clean now if you'd only see. No smoking gun, but the stakes crystallized, a legacy tainted by neglect, not malice. Elena's breath caught, tears blurring the ink. Harlan's fear mirrored hers, hoarding to protect, only to risk more. Carla squeezed her arm, the gesture solid in the dimness. This is the deeper truth. Not crime, but a man's breaking point. You call the shots now, expose it clean, or let it fade. But hiding, that eats you from inside. As shadows lengthened, the sun filtering weakly through the vent in amber slants, they emerged into the cooling air, the door sealing with a finality that echoed Elena's resolve. The lot stretched empty, traffic's hum a distant lullaby. Driving home, documents heavy on the seat, fear twisted with purpose. The crossroads loomed sharper. Contact authorities and Mark, invite the storm for clarity's sake, or one more day prying the last veils? For the first time, The rot felt surmountable, a barrier to cross, not a grave. The boys waited, their light the only map she needed. The next morning dawned with a stubborn drizzle, the kind that turned the outskirts into a watercolor of greys, blurring the edges of silos and storage roofs. Elena's Ford splashed through shallow puddles on the way to Sunset Storage, the wipers slapping a rhythmic protest against the windshield. The air inside the car hung heavy with the scent of damp upholstery and the faint, musty trace of the documents she'd pored over until midnight. Sleep had been a shallow trench, broken by visions of yellow tape and stern-faced officials, Harlan's confession replaying like a looped tape in her mind. The boys had sensed her unrest at breakfast. Miguel's quiet, "You okay, Mom?" over his toast, Tomas's sticky hug before the school bus. She'd nodded, forcing brightness, but the weight clung like the rain on her jacket. The lot was slick and empty when she arrived, the chain-link fence beaded with water droplets that caught the weak light like reluctant jewels. Asphalt gleamed black, releasing a petrichor tang mixed with the underlying oil from yesterday's heat. Hank's office light glowed dimly through the mist, but he was out, truck gone, probably fetching supplies. Carla's pickup sat by the maintenance shed, its bed loaded with tarps and bins, a sign she'd come early. Elena's sneakers squelched on the gravel as she approached the corridor, the fluorescents inside flickering to life with a hesitant buzz, casting watery reflections on the wet concrete. The air in the hall felt cooler, laced with the clean bite of rain seeping under the doors, but Unit 47's threshold promised the opposite, stale rot waiting to reclaim the space. She unlocked it alone at first, the key turning smoothly now, as if the mechanism had grown accustomed to her intrusion. The door rolled up with a metallic sigh, releasing a puff of humid decay that curled around her legs like smoke from a dying fire. Water had trickled in overnight, pooling in shallow dips on the floor, darkening the concrete to a bruised indigo. The piled debris loomed sodden, the bagged vials sweating condensation onto the plastic. Elena stepped inside, flashlight beam cutting through the gloom, her breath visible in the chill. The deeper path they'd carved snaked onward, flanked by leaning boxes that seemed to sag further, their splintered sides weeping dark rivulets. Fear gnawed deeper today, not just of hazards or heirs, but of the unraveling self she'd glimpsed in Harlan's words. What if honoring his mess meant dismantling her fragile hold? Carla arrived minutes later, shaking rain from her bandana, toolbox clanking against her hip. Water dripped from her flannel, pooling at her boots, but her eyes were sharp, scanning the interior with the efficiency of someone who'd patched too many leaks to flinch at one more. Storm got to it, she noted, voice low and steady, pulling a tarp from her bag to cover the worst of the floor. At 42, Carla moved with the quiet assurance of survival, divorce scars hidden under calluses, her brother's shadow a ghost she rarely named. Dreamed about those letters last night. Harlan's boy. Think he's out there, waiting for this to blow up? Eleanor knelt by the low crate they'd left half exposed, the charred wood still radiating a faint, unnatural warmth despite the damp. If he is, I don't know if I'm ready to hand it over. The land deed, it's worth something, Carla. Appraisals online say Route 9's booming. Could pay off the apartment, get the boys a yard. Her voice cracked on the last word, the image vivid. Tomas kicking a ball across green grass, Miguel studying under a real desk, not the wobbly card table. But the confession burned in her pocket, Harlan's plea for forgiveness a mirror to her own unspoken regrets. Nights she'd snapped at the boys from exhaustion, Javier's tools gathering dust, because facing them meant facing the void. They worked in the dim light, the rain pattering on the roof like impatient fingers, amplifying the unit's isolation. The pry bar scraped against the next box, a larger one wedged against the back wall, its surface etched with faint carvings, vines and leaves, Harlan's handiwork from better days. It resisted. Nails rusted into the grain, but Carla's crowbar found purchase, the wood giving with a groan that echoed like a withheld sob. Inside, no more vials or ledgers, just a cascade of sketchbooks. Pages warped, but illustrations intact. Detailed plans for modular homes, eco-sealants applied to test models, notes on sustainable legacies scribbled in the margins. Harlan's vision, born from loss, to build structures that outlasted grief. But tucked at the bottom, wrapped in oilcloth, was a metal tube, official-looking, sealed with wax. Elena's hands shook as she broke it open, unrolling a surveyor's map of the Route 9 plot, marked with boundaries and a hidden shed notation. Safe. Key access. The discovery hit like a cold wave, the air thickening with implications. The shed, perhaps holding prototypes or records that could validate the experiments or damn them as violations. Carla traced the lines with a scarred finger, rain drumming harder outside. This ties it all. If the shed's clean, the land's gold, but if it's more of this mess... She trailed off, meeting Elena's gaze. The moral chasm yawned wider. Venture to Route 9 with the key. Uncover the full truth alone, risking trespass or worse. Or call the authorities now, let them sift the rot but invite the storm. Fines for unpermitted storage, Mark's claim overriding her bid. The boy's stability shattered by court dates and creditors. Temptation whispered, sell the deed quietly, through a fence contact from the diner, pocket enough for a fresh start without the baggage. Javier's face flickered in her mind, disapproving. His calloused hands a ghost on hers. We build true, Elena, no shortcuts. Panic crested as thunder rumbled distant, the unit's vent rattling. Elena imagined the worst. Mark arriving unannounced, eyes hard with resentment, dragging it all away. Inspectors in masks, declaring the site contaminated, her name synonymous with folly. The boys, caught in the crossfire, their trust eroded. Carla's hand on her arm steadied her, warm through the damp sleeve. I've been where you are, holding pieces of someone else's fall. My brother left debts, experiments of his own with pills. I could have buried it, started over. But truth, it frees, even when it hurts. Her words carried the weight of her own crossroads, a quiet testament to choices that lingered. They sealed the box, tarps rustling like conspirators, and stepped into the downpour, the door clanging shut behind them. Rain sheeted across the lot, turning gravel to mud, the chain link a silver blur. Elena's clothes clung cold, but inside resolve flickered, faint but growing. The key in her pocket felt heavier, a talisman of the path ahead. Driving home through the storm, wipers battling the deluge, the pieces aligned not to ruin, but to reckoning. Contact Mark first, bridge the gap with Harlan's words. Or Route 9, one final pry into the unknown. Fear still gripped, but courage stirred, rooted in the faces waiting at home, their hope her compass through the rot. If this story already has your heart, hit the like button. It helps the story of Elena reach more people who still believe in second chances. The rain had eased to a persistent mist by the time Elena pulled into the driveway of their apartment complex. The Ford's tires hissing over wet pavement like a whispered secret. The sky hung low, a slate canopy that mirrored the heaviness in her chest, the key from Harlan's envelope burning a hole in her pocket. Inside, the air was warm with the scent of damp earth seeping through the vents, mingling with the faint, comforting aroma of the boys' dinner. Leftover pasta reheated on the stove. Miguel looked up from the table, his sketchbook open to a half-drawn house with a sloped roof, while Thomas sprawled on the rug, building block towers that teetered on the edge of collapse. "Mom's home!" Thomas called, scrambling up for a hug, his small arms sticky and sure around her waist. Eleanor knelt, pressing a kiss to his forehead, the rain-damp fabric of her jacket brushing his cheek. Miguel's eyes searched hers, older than his years, catching the shadows she couldn't hide. "Everything okay with the unit?" he asked quietly, pencil pausing mid-line. She nodded, forcing a smile that felt more real than yesterday's. Getting there. Found some plans, might turn into something good. No details yet. The truth was too tangled, a web of Harlan's regrets and her own fears. That night, as the boys slept, their breaths a soft counterpoint through the wall, Elena sat at the kitchen table under the single bulb's glow. The documents spread before her like a map to uncharted ground. The deed, the confession, the surveyor's tube with its notations for the hidden shed. Her phone screen flickered in the dimness, searches pulling up Harlan's obituary, died alone 2 years back. No service, son Mark listed as estranged, residing in California. A quick people finder site yielded an address, a phone number, the bare bones of a life. Her thumb hovered over the call button, heart thudding against her ribs. Contacting him meant surrender, the unit, the land, all slipping away to a stranger's claim. But the alternative gnawed deeper, silence as theft. Hoarding Harlan's unfinished amends, like the rot in those boxes. Javier's voice echoed, steady as the rain tapping the window, do right, even when it hurts. With a breath that fogged the screen, she dialed. The line rang, distant and tinny, until a gruff voice answered on the fourth ring. Yeah? Mark Harlan. This is Elena Ramirez. I bought your father's storage unit at Sunset Storage. Unit 47. Silence stretched, broken only by static, then a sharp intake. She poured it out, the rotting boxes, the carving, the letters, the deed, her voice steadying as the words bridged the years. He listened without interruption, his responses clipped at first, then softening into questions. The key, the shed, the prototypes. Dad never let go, he said finally. Voice rough with something like gravel under tires. After Mom. He shut down. I walked because I couldn't watch him drown in it. Send photos. I'll check with a lawyer. The call ended, leaving Elena in the quiet, the phone warm in her hand. No accusations, no demands, just a crack in the wall, tentative as dawn through clouds. She documented everything that week. Photos of the vials, scans of the ledgers, notes on the carvings. Carla helped, her steady hands sorting the salvageable wood into bins, the two of them working side by side in the unit's dim light, the rain's patter a backdrop to their shared silences. You're doing the hard part, Carla said one afternoon, wiping sawdust from her brow. The air thick with the scent of fresh-cut pine from a nearby load she'd brought to test the wood's integrity. Most would have walked. Mark's response came days later, an email with attachments from his attorney. The prototypes were indeed experimental sealants, non-toxic per old lab reports he'd dug up, no violations outstanding, the will fragment held weight, Harlan's intent clear. The storage contents hers by right of auction, unclaimed for years, but the land, a gesture. Dad wanted it shared, Mark wrote. Sell half, keep half for the boys. Build something. Attached was a check for $5,000, back rent he'd owed on the unit, plus a finder's fee for unearthing the past. No visit, no confrontation, just closure, wired from across the miles. The practical unraveling followed, grounded and slow. Elena contacted the County Environmental Board, their inspector, a tired woman with a clipboard and kind eyes, declaring the site clear after tests, no fines, just a warning on proper disposal. The rotting boxes went to a recycler, their wood mulched into compost for community gardens, a quiet justice for Harlan's failed dreams. The intact pieces, the carvings, the sketchbooks, fetched modest sums at a local antique shop, enough to cover the electric bill and buy Miguel that laptop. But the real shift came from the land. Elena partnered with a small developer, selling a portion of the Route 9 plot for a sum that paid off debts and left seed money. With Carla's help, her maintenance skills turning hobby, she started a side gig refurbishing old woodwork, turning Harlan's prototypes into eco-sealants for custom furniture. The apartment stayed for now, But plans brewed. A modest house on the kept acres, room for the boys to run, a workshop where Javier's tools could live again. Months blurred into the rhythm of rebuilding, diner shifts easing to one, evenings filled with sketches of her own, the boys' laughter echoing louder. Carla became a fixture. Friday dinners in her trailer, trading stories over coffee that didn't taste like survival. No romance, just alliance, a mirror of resilience in the industrial haze. One crisp autumn evening, Elena returned to Sunset Storage alone, the lot bathed in sunset's gold, the chain-link fence humming softly in the breeze. Unit 47 stood empty now. Door rolled halfway, concrete swept clean, the air fresh with dust and faint oil from the corridor. No rot, no shadows, just space echoing and vast, a monument to the door she'd pried open. Hank nodded from the office, a rare smile cracking his squint. Cleared it good, looks like new. She traced the empty frame, the metal cool under her fingers, memories flooding, the first hesitant key turn, Carla's steady gaze, the weight of the carving in her palm. A note waited, tucked in the lock slot. From Mark, simple ink on folded paper. Thanks for finishing what he couldn't. Built my first birdhouse last week. No more, but enough. Elena pocketed it, stepping back as the sun dipped, painting the roofs in warm hues. The hum of traffic faded into peace, the kind earned through fear and choice. In the quiet, she saw it clear. Courage wasn't grand gestures, but the steady pry of truth, unlocking lives from the rot. For Javier, for Harlan's Elena, for her boys, and for the woman staring down an open door, ready to step through. Subscribe for more stories of compassion, justice, and redemption. Thank you for watching The Case of the Rotting Wooden Boxes. See you in the next one.